Every damn day.
Hello, everyone. It's Jerry at the Fledge, and welcome to another episode of Every Damn Day. I am rebooting and going to be going live on TikTok every day for sure. And we'll do it this style when I have a guest, or just upload whatever I did on TikTok if it's just me doing a tour or something like that. So we are rebooting every damn day. You're going to see us looking at different cameras because we've got TikTok live. Finally made it to my 1,000 followers. So thanks for getting that happening. And we're going to really focus on why we do every damn day in the first place, which is to talk about how our community can become stronger. And it really centers often around the ALICE threshold, asset limited, income constrained, and employed. And those are the cost of basic living: housing, childcare, healthcare, transportation, technology, and food are the main six. Today, we're going to be talking about recovery, which falls into the healthcare category. And I've got, do you want me to call, I'm going to keep saying my nephew Tommy, just so people know how close we are. But we're peers today. We're here to talk about a serious subject and to get your input on it. So let's jump into that. Tell us a little bit about yourself and like where were you born and raised? Where'd you grow up?
Well, I was born in Lansing, Holt. Grew up there. We moved when I was about 7 in 2011. But yeah, we come back here every year, usually for the holidays. So that's why we're here right now. But yeah, so I have vague memories of being here because I was so young. But yeah, now we live in South Carolina, right outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. But yeah, I don't know.
Well, what are you, whatever you're comfortable with,
Mhm.
what do you want to tell us about substance use?
Well, that was a big part of my life. I think I first used. I think I started off with weed at about 12 or 13, so a couple years ago, and I hated it. Really, the first time I threw up, cried, um, kind of freaked out, didn't really like it, but I did it again the next week for some reason. It was a little bit better, and it kind of started off as something I did with friends just to kind of fit in, and I think that was always the main struggle, because leading up to that, I'd gained some weight in elementary school and kind of got made fun of for that, and I was always trying to find my place, and through substances I could, because middle school everybody was doing it, and there's a huge culture surrounding it. And so that kind of took off at about 13, 14. And it stopped being something that I would just do with friends. And, it became um, an everyday thing, by myself, whatever. And it tended to evolve for me. Like I would always say, oh, at least it's not that. I was smoking weed or whatever, and I always be like, oh, at least it's not drinking. Drinking's worse. And then eventually it started drinking. At least it's not acid, and then you're doing acid, and I would always say that I wasn't gonna do something, and thankfully I never got to the point of doing super hard substances, but I definitely think it would have gotten there. Um, and what substances did for me was kind of number one, you know, give me that group of people and helped me fit in. But it also gave me a break from reality. Because a big part of my story is also depression and anxiety, and it kind of, I used drugs and alcohol as a solution for that. And it kind of took those feelings away for a little bit. until the consequences outweighed the benefit. And towards the end of my using, at about 15, I had a suicide attempt in March of 2020, and a little after that, I knew I was done because it just stopped working. You know what I mean? But I got sober in September of 2020, so a little over 2 years ago. Went to an outpatient treatment, and kind of, yeah, I really, we like to say over there, get sober like you got high. So when I was getting high, I really put my all into that. That was, my main personality trait was drugs and alcohol. And now today it's recovery. So everything I do is recovery based. I go to recovery high school. Everybody at my workplace is sober. The owners, managers, everybody. And then I'm heavily involved in a lot of different programs. Yeah, I think that's a good gist.
So a couple of questions there.
Yeah.
Often people in the cannabis space, in the weed marijuana space, I use the term cannabis for certain reasons. They will often say, it's not a gateway drug. What is your response to that?
It is and it isn't. I think, me personally, and I can really only speak for myself, I was going to do whatever I was going to do anyway. I don't necessarily think that cannabis caused me to do other things or kind of open that door. I think from the get-go, because it is a hereditary thing, but it also is a developed disease. But I think I actually started with drinking a little bit before, around 11. But no, I don't necessarily think that it opens that door per se. I think if you're gonna do harder drugs, I think that's kind of already set up from the get-go.
See, I often think that, because I'm pro cannabis for a lot of different things, including helping with PTSD and depression and, on the mental illness side. But I also think I really liked what you said. You were doing what they were doing.
Yeah.
Whatever they were going to do, you were going to do it because you were looking for that place. And I think that cannabis, is that practice, that fear. I'm going to get in trouble if I do this. But once you get over that hump of being afraid of getting in trouble, then you start exploring a lot more. And if your crowd is doing that, then that's what you're going to do.
Me personally, I stay away from it just because I know myself, and if I get a taste of anything, I'm going all out. But I definitely see the benefits. I have a lot of friends that do it, and I'm all for legalization. I think. Because it does. I mean, from what I've seen, overdose rates go down, crime goes down, mental health improves, and I think I just take things a little too far. So that's why.
Well, I think it's different for everybody, right?
Definitely.
And that kind of let's talk about what was that moment? Was it that suicide attempt that put you into recovery?
No, I kept going a little bit after that. What it really was I did a bunch of mushrooms one night and kind of freaked out. And Dad can attest. He was there.
I heard that story on Christmas Eve. You can repeat it if you want. But
I don't remember much of what happened. I just know I remember driving home in the car from the hospital, which I think it was the second or third time that I'd been hospitalized. Second.
Well, we just got kicked off from TikTok. my access has been completely removed.
They didn't like
Must
that.
have said something
They
wrong.
didn't like that.
All right, so we're back to Facebook and Twitter and all
Cool.
that.
Cool.
So,
Anyway, and we were driving back home from the hospital, and Dad says to me something along the lines of like, you can't do this anymore. And that was the first time where I really agreed. And I think the next day or 2 days later, I showed up at an outpatient treatment, and I did end up smoking weed again. I think I wasn't technically involved in the program yet. I just got assessed, and then later that day. But yeah, like I said earlier, I really just dove into it, and that was 2 years ago. Looking back, that's crazy. But I would say, yeah, like the psilocybin overdose is what the hospital called it. That was kind of the final straw for me. And then, there have been points throughout recovery, and we like to call them bottoms. So that was the kind of the first one. But there had been points where I've been sober and hit like an emotional bottom. That's reinforced my recovery even more. I still struggled with mental health and depression. Just because I got sober, that didn't go away. I remember having a year and just getting a year, and I was still just not feeling right. So I really had to like take a deep dive and not just remove the drugs and alcohol. I think removing substances, that doesn't necessarily cure everything. I think it just opens the doorway for other treatments. Because when I was using, I didn't need any other treatments because I had drugs and alcohol. And that,
well, let's
Yeah.
pause on that for a second, because if you ask a kind of abstract question, why do people use?
Mhm.
The abstract answer is to feel better.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when you have these underlying pains and you feel better because you're using substances, those pains aren't your focus anymore.
Right.
And so, did you do cognitive behavioral therapy?
I did. So while I was using, I did a lot of CBT, and it didn't really do anything because that wasn't my focus. I knew that drugs and alcohol were going to solve my issues a lot better than CBT was, because it's easier, it works faster. But now I do. It's a little like CBT, but it's more so mindfulness therapy.
Okay.
So a lot of spiritual stuff, a lot of meditation, and kind of just inner focus. But yeah, like I touched a little bit of that while I was still using. It was just nothing could come close to drugs and alcohol and what they did for me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Is the meditation and the mindfulness a good substitute now?
It is because I'm a lot more open-minded. But if you tried to get me to do that stuff, when I was using, it was
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that it does exactly the same thing that drugs and alcohol did for me, without the consequences.
Yeah.
Nobody gets DUIs for meditating or
Right.
goes to the hospital.
So, I think about, let's jump into something else first. Recovery down south.
Yeah.
And what do I mean by down south? I really mean in a more conservative place than where Michigan might be more liberal, than the South might be more conservative. It's a lot different, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you see things up here that you wish were down there, and maybe vice versa.
Yeah, vice versa. I don't know. Like I said earlier, legalization I think could help a little bit. But it's very politically, I would say it's very diverse in the area we're in Charlotte. And I think we do okay. We have a lot of different treatment centers. I think at one point before COVID, we had about 400 meetings a week in the Charlotte area. But I would like to see it talked about a lot more. I think, and we had a conversation the other day. I think education about substances is the biggest issue.
Yeah.
And people just need to be more informed and know what they're doing and know the consequences and risks and also know the benefits of it.
Mm-hmm. So do you have harm reduction programs down there?
Not really, not as much up here. It's more treatment centers and that route. We don't have Narcan stands everywhere, and I wish we did. But I feel like Charlotte took a little bit of a different approach. And there's pros and cons to both.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think harm reduction is important because a lot of people don't want to just put it down, or can't just put it down.
Right.
Because I don't think people understand how, and it is a disease, how the disease works.
Substance use disorder is classified as a disability.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a real
Yeah.
health thing. People, I think, don't, I think they look, well, what do you think people, if they hear the word addict,
Mm-hmm.
Where you're from, or even in
Yeah.
the people what do you think their image is?
I mean,
Of
even I myself, before I got sober, it was somebody under a bridge doing heroin, homeless. Their family doesn't talk to them, all that, and then I identify myself as an addict, alcoholic, whatever, and it looks a lot different. I wasn't supposed a well-off white kid from Lansing wasn't supposed to be an addict. It doesn't check that box, or it didn't at least. But I think there's a huge stigma about what that means. Because especially on TV, you see addict and it's a very negative thing, and people kind of just say no. Like DARE was a big thing when I was growing up,
Yeah.
and I signed the poster and everything. And it really isn't that easy, because as much as I wanted to stop, even at certain points, I couldn't. And I don't know a whole lot of the science about it, but I can tell you that no matter the consequences that I was facing, it was usually never enough to get me to stop. You look at all these super well-off people, celebrities, and it's like, how could they have a mental health issue or whatever when they have all this stuff? But it's all that doesn't matter.
Well, I think that us as a society, we don't really look at mental health the same way we do as physical health,
Yeah,
right? We
right.
don't go to an annual checkup of our mental health, and probably we should. And mental health, physical health is such a huge spectrum, right? You can have a cold,
Mhm.
you can have COVID, you can have HIV, you can
Yeah.
have all these things. And people understand that because they think they can see it, I guess.
Yeah.
But with mental health, that same spectrum of all these different things that could be a problem, and you can catch them and you can get rid of them and you can take medicine for them, or you can do things physical like
Yeah.
meditate or whatever. Do you think that to really get to the root of eliminating substance use disorder, we have to embrace mental illness in a much different way?
I think they definitely coincide, 100%. I've never met somebody that struggles with substance use that didn't also have some sort of mental health disorder as well. Um, so I think that's definitely part of the approach is, getting, whether that's more funding or just more education or awareness around it,
Mhm.
and kind of just taking it more seriously, you know?
And looking at this as a true health
Yeah.
problem, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think us as men, we're gonna think you're weak if
Yeah.
you,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
even if you're limping a little bit, we're looking at you like, oh, I can
Definitely.
take you.
Definitely.
But with mental illness, we don't want to say that, right?
Right.
We can't tell people, we can't be vulnerable
Right.
to people. Do you think it's your job to help break that stigma?
Yeah, I think my generation is starting to, which is awesome. Because it's, Gen X and millennials kind of started a little bit, but it's always tough love and, get over it and just say no. Um, but I think the more we learn about how these diseases and disorders actually work, um, I don't think it's as simple as that. And my generation's kind of coming to know that. Because we have a lot of different young people groups down in Charlotte. Um, and it looks very different from the meetings with some of the older people. Because it's not just a substance disorder use meeting. um, People kind of bring mental health into that too.
Yeah.
And mash the two together, especially on the younger side of things.
That's that I think that's very insightful.
Yeah.
And good input. And like so many things, we need to be listening to younger people
Yeah.
more. Somebody has asked a question. Can you explain? Is it enthusiastic recovery?
Yeah, that's one of the terms that is used. So I was at a program. It's called the Insight Program, and it's an outpatient for 3 months, and then you can kind of stay for 2 to 3 years. And but that is definitely the approach that we take. We have 2 meetings a week, and then these things called functions on the weekend. We went ice skating a couple weeks ago. We do a bunch of fun stuff, and I think, like I said earlier, I always struggled to find my place and fit in. I think that's exactly what this program did for me. Because you take a bunch of 15 to 21-year-olds that all have a common problem and stick them in a room together, they're gonna have a lot of fun. And I think it's a great culture, but definitely enthusiastic sobriety recovery. That term is thrown around a lot with us. Yeah.
So is it? What do you think the most? You're doing really well, right?
I think so.
I think you are too, and I think a lot of people think you are. Some of them in this room here. What do you think the number one thing that is helping you do well is, or top 2 or 3 or whatever?
Number one is the spiritual side of things, the meditation, and I pray, not to any sect, religious denomination, just some form of higher power. And I don't like to put too much to that because I start questioning things, but something like that. And then these two kind of go with each other, but the second one is helping other people. I sponsor a couple guys, and even if that means cleaning up after a meeting, or taking somebody home that doesn't have a car, or helping somebody get sober, it's the best way to do it. Because you kind of, when a guy gets it that you're sponsoring or whatever, and you see that light kind of come back into their eyes, it's the best feeling in the world. So and I've had that with, I think I've sponsored probably 15 guys at this point, and not all of them have made it, but still, like, as long as I can help them, I can give them some sort of knowledge so they know it's there. That's all I need to do. And I feel like I kind of owe that to society in a way, because it was so freely given to me at one point.
So you're passing it on.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Another question. Can you talk about Emerald, your recovery high school?
Oh, yeah.
And I'm glad your mom raised
Hey,
that
Mom.
question.
So yeah, it's in Charlotte, North Carolina. There's about 35 kids right now. I started there in, I think, January 2021, and there was only about 9 kids. So we're growing pretty fast, but it's really cool. You walk in and, there's bean bags instead of chairs, and we used to do all online classes, but now we have, I think, 6 or 7 teachers. But it's very individualized, so you get the help that you need. If you walk in with a struggle that day, then that's the first thing that's addressed. Because nobody whose parents are fighting at home or can't stay sober wants to take a math test.
Right.
So you figure all that stuff out. And then, education is also important, so we take care of that too. But it's awesome because I don't think I would be able to do what I do if I went to a public high school, especially down south. There's just substances are everywhere in there. And when you're trying to stay sober and people are, snorting stuff in the bathroom, it doesn't really work out that well. But they do drug tests, and the longer you're there, the more trust you build. I think I get drug tested probably once every 3 months. But
what were the
Yeah.
ramifications for like failing a test?
Failing a test, I mean,
No, like a drug test.
oh,
I'm sorry.
drug
Yeah.
test, got you. So it's not like a 3-strike rule or whatever. Like, they really do work with you.
Mhm.
I failed a drug test, but not because I was doing drugs. It was just a false positive. But I've seen some kids fail there, and it's not, oh, you're kicked out, you're expelled, goodbye. They usually give you 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 chances. And then at some point they kind of ask you, hey, do you even want to go here? And if you seem like you do, they'll kind of do what we call a 30 for 30. So it's not technically a suspension, but you don't go to the school for 30 days, and you're supposed to go to a meeting for 30 days as well and kind of get back on track. And I've seen a lot of kids do that, and just having that leave of absence really makes them miss the school and want to come back, and then they usually pick it up and do pretty good, which I think is awesome. I don't think it should just be a one chance you're done.
Do you think that abstinence would have ever worked for you if it was just forced on you? Kind of
Definitely
like what
not.
you said, say no.
Definitely not. Because I didn't see a point. If drugs and alcohol were doing all this stuff for me, why would I stop?
Right.
Even if I was getting in trouble with cops and hospitalized, and my parents were getting mad at me, it still took away all the negative things in my life.
Yeah.
And I almost didn't care about all that stuff. I didn't have to.
What about like tough love? If they'd have made it a little bit more painful for you, would that have been better? Would that have worked? Or
I think we might have tried that approach at certain points.
did we?
But no, I think when it comes down to it, I had to want to get sober. Nobody else can get sober for me, and I can't get sober for anybody else. So if I don't want to, I'm not going to. And through the programs that I've been in this school, and the people around me, like, I've learned to want that, because the first month or so I really didn't, truly want to be sober, and that kind of came with time, because I realized that I could get the same effects that I did from drugs and alcohol through other things. Um, but no, I definitely don't think, if it's just thrown on me, maybe for a time period, but I
Yeah.
don't think it'll sustain.
I really like what you said, that you guys say a lot, uh, get sober like you got high.
Mm-hmm.
And I like how your story here has kind of arced from
Yeah.
this group of kids. I wanted to fit in with them. And now maybe you're the group of kids that people want to
Yeah,
fit in
yeah.
with you. That's what the Emerald High School
Mm-hmm.
kind of represents. Connection. I say often that connection is the opposite of everything bad,
Definitely.
including addiction.
Definitely.
That as we look out and we're coming to an end here, what advice do you have for a parent or a loved one, that how can they help their loved one get into recovery? Can they?
You can only do so much, um, which is very difficult to hear. Because me personally, when I got sober, I wanted everybody to get sober, um, and I took the wrong approach at first and kind of tried to force it on the people. But I think just taking a step back and being like, "Hey, I'm here for you," and giving them information, and putting putting yourself out there and letting them know that you care, but also kind of taking a step back and realizing that you're the only person you're in control of, and um, this family member, or whoever is going to do what they want to do.
Mhm.
But I don't know, as a parent, I feel like it's kind of hard to let go of some of that control, especially if it's your kid. But I know personally that no matter what my parents wanted me to do, I wasn't gonna do it if I didn't want to. So I don't think just throwing your kid in a treatment center the first time they drink is the right approach. I think just talking to them about it and making sure they know the consequences. Um, and if you have any stories, like, share those, because I definitely feel like with my parents, like, relating to them has been one of the coolest things. Um, Especially with my mom, who's also sober today. It's I kind of took that approach of like, hey, if I can do it, you can do it. You probably should, blah, blah, blah. And the second I kind of stepped back and showed her what my life was like instead of telling her, and I come home and I'm like, Mom, I sponsored this kid today, and he's also in it, blah. And it eventually, this thing kind of rubs off on people, and I think we've got like 4 or 5 sober family members right now. Um, it's kind of like dominoes, but I think just you know living your life. Um, if you're not a parent who has addiction issues or whatever, like, maybe quit drinking. Because I didn't want to listen to my parents tell me about drinking when they were drinking too. It just didn't make any sense. So maybe kind of put that stuff down, and show your loved one how much your life has improved just because of that, and hopefully they pick up on it.
I think that's very good advice. What as we end kind of your portion, then I'm going to talk about another quick
Mhm.
thing. What would you like to say? What did we miss? What do you want to get in there?
Um, I don't know. I definitely think this kind of stuff should be talked about more. And I'm glad you do this. And I was on another podcast a couple weeks ago, kind of similar. But I'm thinking about starting my own just to get more information out there, because I don't know for sure, but I think that if I was more informed on what recovery was, and I didn't think an addict was somebody homeless under a bridge, I could have saved myself from a lot of trouble. Um, so I definitely think that talking about this kind of stuff and really, not spreading false information and stigmas about recovery is super important. And yeah.
Well, thank you so very
Thank
much.
you.
This is
Yeah.
fascinating. I think that, if there's a lesson for older people here, definitely listen to the people that are going through it. Listen to uh, your family member, see what they need, see what they want. Don't just discount them as not a person anymore.
Mhm.
And I guess don't be a hypocrite and all of that at the same.
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk about something else real quick. It's related, but and I was going to start the show with this, but I didn't want to. But you brought me back to it. December 27th is a day that I'll remember forever, since I was a little kid, when our Aunt Marilyn was hit by a car crossing US 27. So I've got this whole thing that 27 was my favorite number. And on December 27th, my aunt, who is 27 years old, got killed on US 27. And she was the 27th death of that holiday weekend. And so that always kind of screwed with me. And I was thinking about that when I woke up this morning. But what really got me is we used to report the number of deaths on a holiday weekend caused by alcohol. And I think we forgot that we used to do that. That would be a thing, 27 deaths this holiday weekend, because we would count the number of deaths. We weren't thinking about how to prevent it, how to stop it, how to, it was like a number that you would report for like the weather or
Yeah.
whatever. And it was just, that seems really ridiculous to me. And we've come a long way in that, but there's a lot of parallels here where we don't want to open our eyes, or we're blind to these problems. And I would just, I've done Narcan trainings a lot. And I always, when I'm with older people who have that stigma in their head, they often, when I offer to certify them in Narcan or give them Narcan, they might respond like, well, I don't know anybody who would ever need that. But I would like to remind you that people will go into the hospital for a hip surgery, get prescribed an opioid, and become addicted to it. And that might be your 60-year-old wife, or it might be your 65-year-old husband. It might be Aunt Betty. There's a lot of things that lead to addiction, and a lot of pains that need to be covered up, or seem to need to be covered up with pills and the quick solution. And we've got a sick society, and the sick society makes sick people. And we've got to heal our society. We've got to heal these pains that are really causing our substance use disorders.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't wait to see what you do. I said yesterday in a promotion of the show that I think that your vision, and you are the future of recovery in South Carolina or North Carolina or wherever you end up. And I love you. I'm proud of you. A lot of people are proud of you. And we're going to give this fool a second on the camera. You going to come say something?
Over here.
Come in the middle here.
Hello.
What you going to say? You going to say we out?
We're out.
Give deuces. All right, everyone. Love
Thank you for
y'all.
having me.
Thanks for listening to us. And we'll see you tomorrow in some version of Every Damn Day. I may be banned from TikTok for talking about recovery. TikTok, you got to get that right. Maybe legalizing cannabis or something through some AI off. But If we can't do it on TikTok, then we won't do it on TikTok. Thank you all. Love you all. See you tomorrow on Every Damn Day.